Welcome back to another episode of Life Changing Challengers. Again, as always, I'm your host, Brad Minus, and I'm here so lucky to have Massimo Rigotti on the show. He is an author, an entrepreneur, a speaker, and an addiction recovery advocate. He's got a best-selling book called Flavors of Confidence, a reflection of those in need, plus two other books that completes the series of flavors of confidence. So let's bring him in. So Massimo, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being here today. And I am very privileged and honored to have you on the show. Massimo, what was your childhood like? I mean, like, what was the complement of your family? Where did you grow up? And what was it like to be Massimo as a kid?
Well, in a word, it was fun. I had what most would describe as a charmed existence as a child. And so I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and my mom had separated from my father before I was born. So there was an immediate separation in my life that I didn't know really existed. So we're able to fast forward through this because it doesn't really have an impact until later. So the first 3 years of my life, I was brought up in kind of that general collective sense that happens when you have a single mother that has a kid. You know, she was still married, but completely estranged from her husband. And so I didn't know my father at that point. And so my grandfather and my grandmother, my aunts and uncles, they were really, really close with me. And so as we're moving along through this, as I'm 3 years old, she runs into a guy she dated way back in high school over a summer, and they end up connecting and get married. And this gentleman becomes my dad. And so his name's Doug, and Doug became the greatest possible person in my life and was this incredible positive influence. He brought me in just like I was his own. He was in advertising. And I was, for lack of a better word, his sidekick. It reminds me a lot of these days. It's very publicized, so it's easy to see it. But I was kind of like little X and Elon, like wherever dad was, I was right there with him. I was under the tables at meetings. I was in his office. If there was a trade show, I was there meeting people. It was this very incredible experience that allowed me to interact with a lot of adults at a very young age. So as we're moving through my life and, I've got a pretty good time in school for the most part, but things aren't quite right. And I can't put that together exactly in my head. And when I was in third grade, something kind of interesting happened. So the first day of third grade, I got called on by this different last name. And I was like, that's not my last name. What's going on? And I got upset. And the teacher came to my desk and said, yes, that is who you are. And I said, well, no, I'm not that person. And so this led to me going to the principal's office and my mom picking me up and having to explain to me that my dad is not my dad and that there's this other guy. And, so my whole world at 8 years old just completely crumbles apart. And what happened in that moment is that all these memories from the beginning of my life came back. So everything that happened when in that 1 to 3 time frame, I started remembering things. I started remembering small interactions that had happened between me and my father, where he had visited here and there in the time period where I was 2 and 3 years old, and those being difficult times. And so as we moved forward into this adoption that occurred, something very horrible happened in court. And I overheard the adults talking, which that's why you should always, make sure you separate the kids from the adult conversation because it can have a huge impact. I overheard saying that, well, that's nobody really wanted him anyway. And that hurt. And first of all, my father didn't show up to the hearing. So dad won by default. And then, it was my mom who said this. So did that mean my mom didn't really want me? And so it really just threw my world into disarray. And I didn't recover from that until I got sober. But it manifested itself in some strange ways. So immediately what I started doing was I'm going to be good enough for my father. This guy I don't even know. I have not spent any amount of time with in recent memory, but I'm going to prove to him that I'm worth something. And so I really like doubled down into this ultimate perfectionist that was going to be good at all these different things because I was going to win his love back. And, that's not a very good methodology for one's life because you're trying to win acceptance of someone that you don't even know. Yeah. So it caused a lot of things, but as a child, you don't understand really what's going on in your mind at that point. You want to be loved, you want to feel loved, and you want to feel accepted. But while this is going on, it really turned me into somebody that didn't have many friends because I became very braggadocious. I became very off-putting to others. Anytime that something would occur, I'd always point out how I was the best at it. I didn't really have any friends, and I withdrew more and more as I got older and into my high school years. I just was really disconnected from everything. I was performing well, but I didn't really fit in anywhere. And that made it very difficult. But I managed to make one friend who became a lifelong friend, and my first business partner, Mac was his name. But high school was funny. It really was like one of those wild times because as you go through puberty, you're like, you don't know what's going on, right? And you're trying to figure out who you are, but it's even more difficult when you really don't know who you are. You know what I mean?
Did you try any sports or extracurriculars?
Yeah, I was really involved in extracurricular, actually. I was in band, orchestra. I ran track and cross country. I was in choir. I was in plays. I did a lot. And honestly, I think that I focused a lot of my time in those areas because it got me away from my parents because I didn't really feel like I fit in with my family. I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere. So I just channeled everything I had into anything that was open. I was the first one volunteering to do anything. Oh, does somebody want to go out and try this? Oh, I was always that person raising my hand.
Hey, so just out of curiosity, what instrument did you play in band?
Well, I played several actually, but I started on the clarinet and that's what I marched. But then I was a bassoonist in orchestra, symphony, and I played several other instruments. Like when we had pit orchestra for, I think the musical was The Pajama Game, I ended up playing the clarinet, the bass clarinet, the saxophone, the oboe, and the bassoon, all from my single chair in the pit. And I would be switching out instruments constantly during that show. It was pretty wild.
You want to know something wild?
What's that?
First chair clarinet all the way through high school.
Awesome.
Played alto sax during marching.
Okay.
For marching. During concert band, I'd switch over to the E flat.
Okay.
Yeah, and played regular clarinet in orchestra and symphony. So yeah, I'm right along with you. And of course, I don't know if you've read anything, but I'm an endurance coach. So yes, I ran cross country. So yeah, so we got a lot of stuff going on there. But yeah, I was kind of in the same. Oh, and I also was in more of the plays, and later became a semi-professional actor.
Nice.
So we're joining at the hip, brother, on the good stuff. Absolutely. So I love that. So what was a favorite role that you played in high school? Do you remember?
You mean on stage or
on stage?
It was probably Meet Me in St. Louis. And I was, oh man, what is the character's name? I can't remember now. He's the
leading male.
No, it wasn't the leading male. It was the secondary male that comes in and from out of town, the older guy.
Right.
I can't remember his character name, but anyway, I really enjoyed that production because that's a big ensemble production and it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. I love that. Absolutely love that. So you go through high school, you end up going to college, university?
Yeah. So in high school, I started working at a pharmacy. So let me give it a little backstory because it kind of helps lay the groundwork for my entrepreneurial life. So I started working at a pharmacy just as a stock guy in the evenings. And then as we were pushing into my junior year of high school, there was a register position that opened. And this was a family run firm, just small, back when there still were small family run pharmacies. And I wanted to work the register. And so I managed to get myself a promotion, and I parlayed that into working there. And ultimately, right as I graduated high school, I got promoted to assistant manager of one of their other stores. And so that's what I was doing the summer before I went to college at Kansas State University. My major was chemical engineering pre-med. Things were, you know, going pretty well, but a couple months into my time at K-State, things were funny. I started not being able to sleep. I was having, really some large, what I know now are manic episodes where I would go like 3 or 4 days without sleeping. And then I would calm down, but I wouldn't have like depressive moods. So I went to the on-campus psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me as bipolar and probably mixed bipolar, but didn't really dig into it too much at that time. And they wanted to put me on medication. Of course, I told them that there was nothing wrong with me, because what would they possibly know? I came from a family, and I don't know if you did, but it was very common in our age bracket that there is no such thing as mental health problem.
Yes. Yes. Been there, done that,
Doesn't exist.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Put the feelings away,
Yeah.
compartmentalize them, get your S done.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with you. And so I took that attitude, and what I began to do at that point in my life is anytime I started to get manic, I would drink. I was like, oh, okay, well, this is a suitable way to handle it, and it seems to work okay, so that's what I'll do. And that continued. And while this was going on, I decided I'd start going back from Manhattan, Kansas to Kansas City and work on the weekends as the weekend manager at the pharmacy. So I worked from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, which effectively was a 32-hour work week in 2 days, and then would go back to school during the week. Well, that was pretty grueling. And so the following year, I transferred to Kansas University, just because that's in Lawrence and it's only like 30 minutes from Kansas City. So it was just much easier to do. And about this time, I just was kind of getting frustrated with the fact that I wasn't going to go any higher in this family-run business. And so I ventured out and got a job at Drug Emporium, which I think Drug Emporium became part of Eckerd, which became part of CVS at the end of the day. But
Right.
I digress. Anyway, I got a job at Drug Emporium as a general manager of a store. And so this was like a huge promotion. I'm at this point 18 years old, and I am running a store that's doing about $2.7 million a month. So in today's dollars, that'd be about $10 million a month store. It's pretty, it's moving. And I have almost 100 employees reporting to me.
You're 18 years old.
I'm 18 years old, almost 19, but yeah, I was 18 years old. I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I was out of my element. I was out of my, I needed more guidance, but I didn't really get it. And so I just I was struggling because I didn't have anything that was like grounding me to reality. On one hand, I have this like really great career going. On the other hand, I'm going to school. And about this time, I ran into this Jeff Judah, who ended up being my first mentor. And he was 20 years my senior. And he took me under his wing, and he's like, okay, you need to start doing this and that. He's like, you really need to decide. Are you going to go to school? Or are you going to start a company? Are you going to do this? And so all these things are going through my head. And of course, my drinking has been increasing through this because I'm stressed too. Because I found out that, hey, guess what? Alcohol also helps with stress. Not really. It doesn't help. But when you're that age, you're like, oh, this is totally helping me out of my situation.
Yeah, well, it's a depressant, right? It kind of
Right.
calms you down a little bit, gives you a little bit of euphoria, just enough to, like I said. So were you like stereotypical alcoholic? Like you had bottles everywhere, you had a flask, you know what I mean? Or was it just whenever you were free, you ended up at a bar or something? Yeah.
At this point, I'm 18, so like it's
Oh yeah, you
it
can't go to the bar.
it mainly was like after work, and I was like really like at this point, I would consider it to be just to take the edge off. I was drinking primarily wine and beer, nothing, no hard liquor. It was just enough to take the edge off so I could then relax and go to sleep. Nothing huge. And it actually would be several years before it escalated to the point that I'm like, hey, look, I'm an alcoholic. But this is kind of that segue moment in the crossroads in my life where I ultimately decide that I'm going to not only drop out of school, but I'm also going to quit this job, and I'm going to go to work for a startup company in Springfield, Missouri. So yeah,
Yeah, major life change.
yeah. So I just dropped everything, cut all ties, and moved to Springfield, Missouri. And I did it before Jeff. Like Jeff found this opportunity, and I went with him, and we met with the founder of this company. It was in the banking industry. Unicard was the name of the company, and they dealt with check guarantee, which back when this is 1994, 95 timeframe. So, like everybody's still writing checks. We hadn't heard of debit cards or anything at that point. So I just picked up everything and I left and went to Springfield, Missouri. And I was installed as vice president of marketing for a startup, basically banking company. So,
That's crazy.
yeah.
You're 19 years old. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
It was great.
I mean, but it's great. I mean, where else are you gonna, at that age, whether it's drug induced or not, you're a sponge. You're an
Yeah.
absolute sponge. Everything that you can get your hands, especially if you really enjoy what you're doing. I mean, it's just like it's crazy how much things that you actually soak up and are able to then and recall, remember, and comprehend. I wish I can still do that. You know what I mean? Now
Yeah.
it's just not the desire to learn is there, but the recall, not so much.
Yeah. Now I find that I'm more in the application of all the grand knowledge I've accumulated rather than anything related to. I mean, I'm still learning and I try to learn as much as I can, but you're right. It doesn't soak up quite as much, probably because the sponge is pretty much soaked at this point.
Right, there you go. There you go. We only got so much room in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't push any more in. But so this was a really interesting spot to be, and the timing is really interesting. So this is in my book, but it's really interesting digression of the story. But so I'm working for this company, Unicard, and their product is check guarantee. So, back in the day, you didn't really there were some pocketed debit networks, where you could use a card and you could use your PIN number in order to pay. But I mean, like there were very few merchants that participated. And we had this that like guaranteed that you could write your check anywhere if you presented this card. And we had a merchant network set up. And so we would take that check and it would process through our modem bank and then we would present that ACH transaction to the bank. And, I'm like looking at all this. And as the VP of marketing, I have sales reps out there trying to sign up more merchants. And they're like, this would be a lot easier if we just had, access to another network. I mean, this is going to take forever to add, everyone to this. So I went out for a walk and this was sometime in March of, what would that have been? March of maybe 96, I think. And I'm like, what could we do here? And so I had the crazy idea that if we could somehow get the Visa logo on our check card, that maybe we'd figure out a way to debit transactions in real time. So I write this, I stay up all night. I got into a mania. I stay up all night. I write my, a boss, a business proposal, on how we're going to do this. I'm like, this is the way, we're going to go out. We need to get the Visa logo on our card. And then I think we could tie into everyone's bank account because every bank is a Visa participant and we can just automatically pull it out of their checking account. And he's like, well, that's a great idea, but there's no way Visa's going to play ball with us. I'm like, you don't know. Let's get him on the phone. So he calls them and he ends up working over the course of like a week or so. He gets the right people on the phone and they end up saying, we'll do it. And
hold on. Massimo, are you telling me that you are the person that first came up with the idea of the debit card?
Of the Visa debit card, yes. Yes.
Wow. That
Yes.
you're talking about something revolutionary. I mean, think if you think about where we are today,
Well, I
that's a
know.
revolutionary that changed everything.
I know it did, but there's a sad part of this story, and
Oh no.
that's why I'm telling you this story, because like this is a good example for not only entrepreneurs, but it's a good example also to how keep like your mindfulness and on everything going on. So Visa wasn't technically interested in it. And we had signed this non-compete and everything. They were so busy focused on trying to get people to use their credit cards for like gas and groceries and all this other stuff at the time. You probably even remember the commercials since you're about my age. They weren't focused on checks. And so it's really interesting how this ends up playing out. So I even told my boss, I'm like, hey, look, we're going to need something that sells. So from a marketing standpoint, let's see if we can get, access to Warner Brothers, and we'll use like Bugs and Daffy making fun of each other for still writing checks. And so that was like what we presented to Visa. And they said, that's fine, but we're going to need licensing per, for this. And it ended up being, I think, about $400,000 per year. We could use their network, and then we were going to get approximately 1 cent per transaction. Now think about that. Like, that's a lot of money when you think about how many debit transactions happen today, every day, a penny on every debit transaction. That's a lot of money. And he turns it down. He says that's just too much. I don't think. I'm like, dude, you don't understand. This is like Tesla turning over his money to George Westinghouse here. You're like, this thing could potentially be the biggest thing ever. And he's like, I just don't see it. I was like, great. So I quit, and I left because I knew right away that as soon as that non-compete time frame ran out, that Visa would see the potential. Someone inside Visa would see the potential in this and be like, wait a second, we thought this was stupid, but this is actually a good idea. We should probably do it. And that's exactly what happened. At the end of that year, they rolled out the Visa check card. And hilariously enough, it was Bugs and Daffy with Bugs presenting his card and making fun of Daffy and calling him a maroon for still writing checks. And when I saw that commercial come on, it was right around Christmas time that year. I was like, son of a gun. I just and then it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm learning from this. Better non-competes, better partnerships. Make sure that you understand who you're in business with. And, it was just so many things that I learned out of that. But at the end of the day, I love it because every time I see that, I'm just like, yeah, I know where that came from. So it's really kind of cool.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. Just the idea that, you had the idea. I mean, I wish it would have played out better for you. Don't get me wrong. But just the idea that you had this, that has us. And I think a lot of us down the line, maybe not, you didn't get into it as far as you do, but a lot of these things that you're like, oh yeah, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And blah, blah, blah. And they don't act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years later, all of a sudden it's oh my, look at that. Do you remember when we talked about that? I remember that. Oh my God. And now they're doing it, so that's, yeah. But at least you jumped in and you took action. A lot of us don't. So I get that. Wow.
There are a lot of lessons wrapped in that whole story. Believe me.
Oh,
I mean, you can pull it from a lot of different directions, and I often do because it's and the thing that I get asked the most is like, aren't you bitter about that? I'm like, no, it was probably the single greatest learning experience of my life.
Yeah. I get that, and that's a great way to look at it. So where were you in I'm used to saying fitness journey. Where were you in your drinking journey, Massimo, at this point?
Well, then at this point, I was drinking every day now. I'm drinking mainly beer, but it wouldn't be unusual for me to drink a case of beer a day. I mean, I'm just like, seriously, I'd just open a beer and I'd start drinking when I woke up and I stopped drinking when I went to sleep. So as I left there, I went to work at Sprint, and worked as a network design engineer. I somehow managed to
What?
yeah. I interviewed for a position and I didn't have a degree in engineering, but I I knew somebody and I knew all of the information. And so I interviewed really well and I got the job. Long story short. So I ended up,
No, that's the industry that I actually make money in.
okay.
So that's why I'm like, wait, chemical engineering to entrepreneur, was in pharmacy, and now he's a network engineer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was involved at the very beginnings of the transition for Sprint when they bought all the PCS networking. I was actually the SME for DSC's IMTN broadband DAX. That was my piece of equipment that I know in and out. I learned TL1, I learned a new language. And I should have said at some point in through all of this is that programming has been like a mainstay, like hobby knowledge source point for me since I was, much younger, but it never really played out into anything. This was the first time I actually really was like starting to use some actual programming and writing shell scripts to do things in TL1 and that. And I was like,
Okay.
hey, this is kind of interesting. And starting to then look at everything that was going on in the internet space. So
Interesting. Yeah, and it's funny stories that's how I got involved with PCs and stuff as well, is tinkering around with stuff. I wasn't big into programming. I mean, if you remember way back when we used to get the computer magazines, and in the computer magazines were all the scripts, and you had to type it in because there's no place for you to store it. And then when you did want to store it, you had to do it on cassette. um, so I mean, that's how far back I go back. And I remember and writing it all in, and then playing the games and all that stuff. And then for me, it was I started to hook up computers together. Then all of a sudden, friend of my dad's was like, I've got this shop and I would really like to figure out a way to have all the things on the upstairs computer be in the downstairs computer.
Ooh.
And I was like, well, you just, put in the disk and come back down. But he says, that's what I want to get rid of. I'm already doing that. So I started looking around, and then of course came around to looking through the magazines, and lo and behold, Lantastic is what it was called.
I remember that.
Remember that?
I do.
And so I saw that says, okay, we can invest in this. I put it up, and then I ran it all. I ran a network cable all the way down. I put it in the other one, and bam, we were sharing folders. Is like, networking negative 101. Yeah, so that's basically how I got started in it, and then from there it just kept leveling up. So yeah, that's so interesting that you got it that way. Okay, so now it makes more sense. At least you weren't able to walk into Sprint and go, yeah, my last job, I was as an entrepreneur, I came up with the idea for a debit card. Before that, I was a chemical engineer, and yeah, okay, now I want to be a network engineer. Hire me. All right, so now it makes more sense. Now it makes more sense.
Yeah. So I mean, like, this was still a time period as well and I feel like sometimes I have to explain this to those younger than us. You didn't necessarily have to have a degree. You just had to prove you had the skill set to do a job at this point in time. Yeah.
Right. This is the pre now, right? And we've kind of gone through this cycle where you got to go and get a degree, or there wasn't anyone look at you, to now where you're going to the point where once back there.
Yeah, we are.
Prove that you can do it, then they'll hire you without a degree.
In some ways, I think it's better personally because, boy, I worked my butt off to try to rise to the level because I was sitting, like, the guy in the cube next to me had a doctorate in electrical engineering. And I'm like thinking, boy, I need to step up my game because he was able to think about things that were going on inside of the network at such a deep level. I was like, okay, I don't understand that yet, but I'm going to. And I did. And I worked really hard to get to that level of knowledge.
Same.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, what it was like being in telecom in the late 90s. Oh, my goodness. Every single day was a vendor party. And here comes the drink. So this is when I switched from drinking beer into I started drinking mixed drinks and like started into the transition into drinking Jack Daniel's straight, which would become my drink of choice. Yeah, Jack Neat was my drink. No ice, just
Yeah, around the same time period, I found the same thing. I had joined the military in 1996, and in 1997, I ended up in Korea.
Mhm.
Started with, and I spent 18 months in Korea, and like at first it was beer, soju, mixed drinks, Jack and Coke, hold it Coke.
oh, but oh,
Yeah, I get it. I know that transition very well. It wasn't an everyday thing, but I did,
no.
as we got off base and stuff. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and here's the thing, it was not looked down upon for you to have drinks at lunch at this period in corporate world either. So you would go to a vendor at lunch and you might have a couple drinks at lunch, and then you go back and work in the afternoon. Then you go out with another vendor after work and have more drinks. And then I would go home and I'd probably drink some more, and then I would get up and do it all again. And so what are you at that point? You're an alcoholic. I mean, you're not really, you're a functioning one. You're not to the
Right.
point that you need to drink all the time, but you're really starting to push the envelope. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's where I was. And while I was at Sprint, I heard that well, I wanted to do some more things on the internet. So me and my friend that I mentioned earlier from high school, Mac, we started a company in the internet space, and we started doing some technical support for small businesses. And we had reached a point where we had an employee that was working full time for us, and both of us were working at Sprint. And we were able to do this because we had cell phones. So, like, our office phone was like, I had it forwarding from the off, quote unquote, off true office to my cell phone. So it appeared as if we had an office, and we would schedule meetings during the day that coincided with other meetings we had at different locations of Sprint in the Kansas City area. So it made it very easy to appear that I was going to a meeting, but I'd go to a client meeting, and then I go to my Sprint meeting, and then I come back to my desk. So we managed to pull this off for about 6 or 8 months, and then we kept growing. And we had this opportunity. This association management firm was there. The two owners were going through a divorce, and they wanted to basically get out. And we ended up picking up the pieces of this divorce basically and threw a company together. And suddenly we're running an association management firm. So so
That's
so now
crazy.
so
Right.
now so now I'm doing something entirely different yet again. So and a lot of people don't know this, but for those who don't, most associations are not actually managed by the board of directors or the association. They hire a firm that actually takes care of the day to day, answers the phone, replies to members, sets up their conferences, all that sort of stuff. So that's what this firm did, and we had some pretty sizable clients, but two of them were in the insurance space. And 9/11 was just about to happen. And when it did, this was catastrophic for this company. And it was just like I saw the handwriting on the wall, and our two largest clients said that they wanted to self-manage as they saw themselves through the crisis, and so they gave their notice, and we just kind of said, oh, we're going to have to pack it up. But something interesting happened at the same time this was going on. I was dating a model at the time, and she was having me look at her contracts and the like, and asking me questions about her representation and so on and so forth. And I would answer, I'd make adjustments on the contracts. And then one day she said, would you mind looking at this for my friend? I said, oh yeah, no problem. And she said, why didn't you take this to your manager? She goes, you are my manager. I said, whoa, when did that happen? She's like, I fired my manager months ago. You're better than he is. I'm like, okay. So my soft landing out of this was I parlayed this into becoming
And talent.
a talent manager, and I ultimately moved to the Los Angeles area.
Wow, what a freaking life! And I mean, at this point, you've got to be. Let's see, this I do what because my age. So I let that.
25 at this point, basically. Yeah, yeah. So 25, 26 is so as I'm rounding out, what was 9/11 was in
One.
2001. Yeah. So I would have been 26 at the time. So, yeah. So that's what happened. I was like, this looks interesting. So then I kind of packed it up and did that. I had a wonderful time, met a lot of people that are very interesting. The kind of high point of my time out there was I had 8 of the models on Deal or No Deal were clients of mine on the initial run. So that was pretty cool, and I got to I started kind of having my hand in some producing and stuff like that, but I was coming off the rails because what what happened is I literally lost ties to anybody that was in my life because my family is all back in the Midwest. They're in the Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma area, so like no one is nearby that I know. And so I'm completely untethered from any semblance of reality. And I went full on Hollywood, and in the sense that there wasn't a party that I didn't want to attend. And there wasn't an address in Hollywood Hills that I hadn't visited.
So, I mean, don't people always think of going to Los Angeles if they want to get sober? Isn't that like the mecca for sobriety?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, totally. But I didn't have that on my mind. I was having too much of a good time, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, I think there's a part of a lot of us that think that going into that realm and being with the beautiful people is going to be this incredibly great time. But it's almost equally as miserable because you very quickly realize that so many of the people that you're interacting with, A, don't know who they are, and B, they're running from something. And so it's not very healthy. And I understand, sadly, why so many people who are in the business fall apart because it's very hard to latch on to anything that's real. You spend most of your time kind of masking your own pain and your own challenges with yourself, and you don't really know who you are, and so it's just very fake. Is the best way to say it.
I mean, that could be an answer to a lot of people's questions. I mean, I always thought about Heath Ledger and Robin Williams and the guy that played the one that really, really shook me was the guy that played Flynn from Glee, and the guy that played the famous Jet Jackson, who on Disney, who became a detective on Rizzoli and Isles. All those people, like suicides that you were like that I kept thinking like, why? You got all the money in the world. You've got all the friends in the world. You got everything you can possibly imagine. There's nothing you can't buy. There's nothing you can't do. There's nothing. And you're like, and I mean, all these people went out on top, and I'm like, why? How could you possibly do this to yourself? And I think you might have answered the question.
It really is the answer. And this is the lesson that I take away from my time in Los Angeles is that it's kind of like you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the friends in the world, but if you don't know who you truly are and you don't have truth in your own relationships, you will just completely spiral. It's sad.
Man,
It's sad.
Imagine. So, how did you get out of that?
Well, I mean, in some ways I got lucky. I started I started dating one of my clients, which had been a no-no, but I started dating one of my clients and then we ultimately got married and part of us like we're getting out of here. She was from Minneapolis area. And so we moved back to Kansas City and I started a printing company cuz why not? I love your reaction, Brad. It's priceless.
I mean, part of it is I'm looking at myself because I kind of went that route, but it was a little more secular, a little kind of like it was a little bit more gradual. It's just for instance, I'll just roll them out there. But I was Besides being in computers and everything else, I was a real estate appraiser. I was a stockbroker. I was a photographer for a little while. I'm on that same realm, but I wasn't. But they were jobs. They weren't entrepreneurial ventures. I would have loved to be entrepreneurial ventures, and here you are. Now you're digging in here, you know. So, hey, so what was your claim to fame as far as the printing press go? I shouldn't say your claim to fame, but what was your specialty?
Well, I mean, like in a way, kind of. I mean, I was really early to something called variable data printing. There was some new technology that had come out, and it called XMPi, and Xerox ended up buying the company. But I got certified in this technology, and basically what it does is it allows complete dynamic printing when you combine it with digital press. And there was so much going on with the internet at the time. And I started getting these crazy ideas about, like, well, what if we could tie together what some individual that is a customer of yours together with a print campaign? So we know that your customer likes to golf, and we could send out a flyer to buy a new car with somebody on a golf course. Wouldn't you like to drive up to the course in a new, whatever? And so we were able to personalize all that data from knowing that about them, and then and pull and do it dynamically. So when for instance, your postcard came out, it would look one way, and the very next postcard that printed would be another way. And so that was the kind of cool technology that I was involved in, the very beginnings of it. It's a mature thing now, but it isn't done quite to the extreme that I somewhat took it to.
I mean, that's the early tracking cookie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Except I tied it back into actual physical printed material, which
Yeah.
not many had done. I'm not the first by any means, but not many had done it at that point. Now it's like relatively easy to do it, and there's several companies out there that can help you do it. So that's what I was doing, and then that caught the eye of this is somewhat funny. So here I like come back and I get involved with extended warranty service contracts. I mean, like, everybody's had one of those phone calls before, right? Brad, let's talk about that car of yours. Is it under 6 years of age and under 100,000 miles? We can really get you in a good warranty today. So I worked for I had a client and worked as the clearinghouse printer for these contracts, because I had devised a method to bring in all of the call center information and print out from a single file every night. Like, they would have this data dump, and then our program would bring everything together, and then, working with 53 different insurers, printed the contract that was sold on a book that was personalized. So it might be one was Endurance, and one was Car Safe, and one was United, and like every printed thing was different that came out, and so it was completely branded, and this allowed faster processing and cheaper production for them, because prior to this, it didn't look as nice, because they would just send out this bland book, and it wasn't really branded as Endurance, for instance. Endurance is still in business, so I can talk about that. But
Yeah.
So so we had this great pack that we put together for Endurance too. It was like with a folder and inserts and everything. It like really took them up a notch, and it came to the customer in a FedEx pack that was branded. So I mean, it's like, well, I spent $2,000 on this. It looks like I spent $2,000 on it, but it was costing about $20 a pack for them to get that from us, but it was profitable, and that was the opus of projects that I did at that company. So that was E16. And so and then the attorney generals came down hard on several of those companies and put them
for the warranty companies, where you're talking
for the warranties companies, yeah. And that had become like a huge part of our business, and it put us in a tight spot. And at that point, my drinking was completely out of control, because we're talking about this entrepreneurial journey, but the stress and everything else that was going on with running all of this had become not only drinking Jack Daniels all the time, but I forgot to mention that back in LA, I picked up a mean cocaine habit. So now I'm dragging two addiction habits along with me in my daily life, right? And so that's like difficult to sustain. And my marriage was starting to fall apart mainly because I was out of it all the time. I mean, I wasn't even present, and I knew it. I knew that I needed to stop. I knew I was in a bad spot, but I was like, I can still do it all. And I think looking back at it, that was the voice of me from childhood going, you just got to work harder. You can win you can do this. You can win it. I just really believe it.
Yeah. So, um, are you comfortable talking about the first time you ever tried cocaine?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what it was? Tell me about just real quick because I'm going to tell you mine.
Okay. Well, mine is going to sound like somewhat crazy and medicinal in a way because I was working on a project and it was late at night and in LA. And I think it was definitely on set someplace. And I was working through all this paperwork. I'm like, oh man, I am so tired. I need to sleep a couple hours. And I was just like, and somebody leans over and is like, here, just have a hit of this. And I was like, what is it? And he's like, it's blow. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going down this road. It's like, I know myself. If I start, I will never stop. And they're like, it'll be fine. You need to get this done, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And then I was like, what the hell? It's not going to hurt anything. I'll be okay. And then I did that first bump and wow, I was so awake and so lost. Yeah. I mean, it was like, okay, I got that done. What else did we need to get done? Like, and then from that point for the first like couple years of use, it was very measured. Like I like literally measured out the maximum amount that I could do in a day. And then I would like space it out and I would calendar it and I would write down when I had a bump. So I made sure that I didn't do more than,
Okay.
yeah. So I was like, I really managed it, but eventually got out of control because like, oh, this is a pain in the butt. And then and then I had like a bullet that I would carry with me all the time. And yeah, it was a mess.
And it just got worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was living in Chicago and we had a poker night with the guys, and there's like six of us sitting around the table, we're playing and stuff. And then one guy says, hey, does anybody want to bump? And I grew up I grew up even with my father at age 5 going, if you ever decide to pick up a cigarette, I will kill you right there. Because he had smoked and he knew how bad it was and watched a couple people die. And he's like, if I find you have a cigarette, I will murder you right there. Yeah, you know what I mean? And it wasn't, obviously it wasn't going to murder me, but it was going to be bad if that ever happened. So never tried it, never did anything. But we're sitting around this table. And I was working as a real estate appraiser. And all I know is that I've got a stack of reports I've got to get done. They're about this big. Yep. We're sitting around, we're playing a little poker, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, no, I'm like, no, I can't do that. Anyway, we finished up playing that night and everybody left except for me and the guy that had the Coke. And I'm like, hey, listen, I got all these reports to get done. Can you sell me, enough? I've never done it before. We'll try it. He goes, well, let's do a line together and you go home and see how you feel. And I'll give you a little bit extra. So he basically said, do 2 lines and then you bump every couple hours. When you start to feel you're starting to fall, bump, you bump. And he showed me how to do it. And that night, I must have had, I don't know, 20, 30 reports I had to get done. It usually would take me 45, 50 minutes a piece to get it done. Knocked them all out that night. Every single one of them. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. And then went to the gym, worked out. And then we had to go turn them in. I turned them in. Everything was perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I'm starting to come down. And he told me, he goes, listen, you're going to crash and you might crash 12 hours. I says, so don't worry about it if you end up like really sleeping enough. And so I'm starting to fall down and I'm like, okay, all right. It's about time to go to sleep. Oh, well, it's like, I don't know. It's like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And I've been up all night and my boss calls me and he goes, I don't know what happened, but these are probably the best reports I've ever seen come out of you. They are amazing. Everything is perfect, detailed, dot your I's, cross your T's. None of that stuff that I've been bothering you about has been done. And I'm like, I just want to hand to you. I'm like, great job. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, boss. Clicked the thing, went over, took the rest of the Coke and poured it down the freaking toilet. And I went, it's flush. And because you remember in the 70s, there was this commercial, and all it was this guy in a brown suit with a monkey on his shoulders, a real monkey. And he's
Yes.
just like rocking around in a circle, right? And it's basically a spotlight coming down. He's in this brown suit tie and he's walking around, and all you hear him say is, I do coke so I can work longer, so I can make more money, so I can buy more coke, so I can work longer, so I can make more money, so I can buy more coke. That is the first thing that went through my brain. And I went, click, cluck, flush.
It's
I'm
her though. That commercial is probably so. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that commercial till just now.
it literally popped into my brain, you know what I mean? And this is 1993, 94, something like that. It literally popped into my brain like that. And I was just like, nope, I'm out.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good
Well,
for you.
I don't have an addictive personality, God knows I've tried. But but I don't. So it just came right to my mind. I'm just like, I'm not doing that. But anyway. All right. So I don't say you're addicted to Coke, but you're definitely doing it, but you are starting to become an alcoholic. And you are finishing up this printing entrepreneurial journey that you are on.
Yeah. So this was coming to a close. A lot of things just all happened at once. My business partner in the printing company dies, and a lot of things happened at once. So we lost a bunch of clients. Then my partner dies. He was 49, and he was on vacation with his family. So that like hit hard. I told my wife I wanted to get divorced. So like just like there's a culmination of all these things that happened at once. And then I went to a printer I subcontract some stuff with. And his name's Wayne, and he's like, hey, I'm getting ready to sell my printing company as well. Why don't you join forces? And so like three of us came together into one kind of transaction there. And suddenly I'm at this other printer, but I'm not happy. And it's just, life is just not going generally well. But I'm also like completely glazed over by the fact that I'm doing blow daily and drinking I'm like literally at this point drinking a handle of Jack Daniels every other day. So like half of a handle a day. I'm not hardly eating. So my body's basically figured out how to turn the grain alcohol into everything that I possibly need nutrition wise. So it's just bad. And so in the midst of all this, I take a vacation with a group of friends and go to Destin, Florida. And when I'm there, I run into this girl on the beach, Samantha, and this woman would ultimately change my life. She, we just like, we immediately we'd click. And I'm not sure why, but sometimes you meet people in your life and that's just how it is. And you just have to learn to run with it. And I did. And we became real close, but she was like really focused in on the fact that you've got some problems, man. And so in her focus to do all of, to like fix me, so to speak, is she thought that the underlying challenge for me was my bipolar disorder that was causing me to do all the drinking and the drugs, and I still didn't think I had anything wrong with me, but I played along. And the end of 2014 found me losing the last of everything I had, and I became homeless in December of 2014. And this was like a complete wake up call. I had my car, but it's still like that was still very, very tough and living on the street. But it didn't stop my entrepreneurial mindset, mind you. I started a homeless taxi service. And where this is actually really cool. So I actually would put out on the socials that I was going between these gas stations. And if you paid me $5, I would take you basically anywhere on the stop. It's like a long bus. You could be just between one of the stations, but it ran from all the way downtown to southern Johnson County in Kansas City area. So it's like 20-mile round, like south, and then 20 miles back to the north. And I would run this, and I made some good money for a bit. I was like, man, this is great. Oh man, you know what I need to do now? Get really fucked up. And so it all goes away, right? And so I wallow around in on the streets of Kansas City pretty hard. And in August of 2015, I end up in the hospital, and I won't go into it for the purposes of time, but I have a near death experience after having 3 grand mal seizures. And when I come to, you would think it would be enough that like I would stop, but I was drunk 3 weeks later. And things just nothing seemed to be working. And Samantha kept pushing me to just something is truly bothering you down deep, and you got to figure out what this was. And then I go to rehab, and that's where I discover this memory that I already told you about my adoption. That's something that I had put away deep down inside of my head for, God, 30 years or more. And once I had that, it was, wow, okay, this changes everything. Now I know what I'm fighting. And I was able to then stand up sober. And I got a job in March of 2016. So March 23rd of 2016 is my sobriety date. So I'm coming up on 10 years here next spring.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I just want to step back real quick. So you meet Samantha and Destin.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when you say that she was telling you all this stuff, is this a phone? Is this socials? Is it DMs? Is it something? Or did she come out to Kansas City with you?
Well, it's a combination of things. We spent a lot of time FaceTiming one another. She lived in Alabama, and of course I'm in Kansas City. We wrote letters to one another when I ended up on the street because I didn't have a phone a lot of the time. Right. So it turned into like literally like 1885 all over again. I'm writing her a letter and she's writing me one as if there was no technology. And that was a really powerful way to go back and forth too, because she would ask me different things and then I would write her back responses, and then I would have to wait, and right. There's a lot of anticipation and like thinking more about what she said in her last letter and reading them again and going, oh, I need to think about that. So, I mean, like her letters were very, it was like correspondence psychology in a sense, right? It's my psychiatrist by mail. But the best psychiatrist is the one inside your own head. And I think she knew that. So she managed to ask the questions that were really, really made me dig deep and figure a lot of things out about myself. So that, yeah.
And it was just the fact that you were, that you had a father you didn't know. And then you found out that the father you thought you didn't know wasn't really your father. And then you got adopted, and then, oh my God. Yeah, I could see that. But that just caused that effect that you didn't. I mean, what was the revelation there? I know what I could think it might have been, but what was the revelation?
The revelation really more than anything was that it didn't matter about these underlying things. It didn't matter that people had discarded me because I had, basically that feeling of being discarded. And I had lived with that and pushed it under when I was 8 years old. Like, I thought that I wasn't worth anybody. This is why all of my relationships failed. That's why all my friendships failed. That's why business relationships were challenged. And once I was able to like push past this and realize like how to openly connect with others on a deeper level, because then I actually understood where I was coming from, as opposed to I had this mask on that had become so heavy that it wasn't even me. I mean, I really didn't even know who I was. And it's really quite, I'm so lucky I managed to get out of Los Angeles without dying or killing myself. I really am, because I was in the same boat. And that's why I got along so well in that arena, because I was with a bunch of like-minded people. And thankfully my ex-wife pulled me out of that herself by saying, you're not going to do this anymore. I think she saw it. One thing I didn't mention as well is that when my partner passed away, my business partner passed away, she showed back up in my life. She like called me right away. She started coming by my house every day, spending hours with me. I mean, like, this is my ex-wife. There's no reason to do it. And when my book came out, my first book came out, and I gave her heads up about it, and she confirmed what I wrote in the book. It was like, I always just felt like the only reason that she did this is that she was afraid I was going to kill myself. And she told me, she goes, yeah, that's why I came by there every day for a month, just to make sure that you're going to not do that.
I can't
Which,
even imagine. But it sounds like to me, and I'm not, I'm not that averse to this stuff, or but that you felt like you were discarded, so you were going to discard other people before they discarded you. You're
bingo.
like, nope, I'm not going to let this happen. Nope, that's why I'm out.
Yep.
I'm gone.
Yep.
Okay.
The second that I felt like I had let someone in enough, I would just cut it off, because it's like, no, because you're just going to discard me. So I'm going to discard you before I can be discarded. And if you do that, you're never going to connect with anybody, because
Exactly.
I mean, like, it's the ultimate horrible wall to have up. It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. So what happened? So you got sober.
I got sober. I mean, thank God. And so I started working for I got a temp job and pulling parts at Kubota Tractor. And I purposely walked in not with any semblance of like, oh, I have all this experience doing all these sorts of things. I just put my head down and I worked. And just over 3 years later, I was the general manager of the facility I'd walked in the door as a temp at, which happened to be the largest facility that they have on the globe. And yeah, that was quite an experience. And then I started traveling and consulting. I started working on SAP upgrades and transitions. And I was having a really great time at Kubota. But at the same time, I just didn't really quite feel like I was on the path that I wanted to be on, because I was
Right.
working for somebody else, and I just am such an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're an entrepreneur. Yeah.
I was like, I could stay here and like, no, I'm not going to do it. I got up one morning, I looked in the mirror, I'm like, and I asked myself whether or not I wanted to keep doing this. And I told myself no. And so I went in and I gave my notice. And like so many other things in my career, as you picked up by now, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just went in and handed my notice in. I really didn't have a clue. But
But it
that's
fulfilled its. I mean, it sounds like it fulfilled its purpose. I mean, you were homeless, finally sober. Now at least you had this. The idea was for you to go in and have money. You probably didn't realize that you were going to spend 3 years there.
No, it ended up being almost 5, but yeah, by the time it was done. So I worked a couple of years in that once I hit that level, So it was a great experience. I mean, like, and such an awesome company. I mean, such an awesome company. They were so good to me. It's amazing. But the one thing that I hope that everyone takes away from that is that hard work is the most important thing. You can get anywhere you want, and like, if you just put don't tell anybody what you're capable of. Just show them, because if you show them, people will just, I spent all my time around there being afraid somebody would find out I was homeless, which nobody ever did. Because when I first started there, I was sleeping on a friend's in the living room on the floor every night. Like, for the first 3 months I was working there, I was sober, but I needed a place to stay. He goes, well, if you can stay sober, you can stay here every night. So, I mean, like, I was always afraid of, there was some fear there too. But so I walked away from all that, and I started doing business consulting, and it's kind of like what I continued to do until Samantha was tragically murdered. And that happened on August 1st of 2020. And she was killed by a drunk driver. And yeah, it was a lot. She meant so much to me. She meant the world to me, really. And I it's still painful.
I can imagine.
Because it's just, there's so much that you don't know about someone who's taken so young. I mean, she was just 3 months shy of her 25th birthday, so she was, or it is just like, just too young.
I can imagine, and then and now you're also in the midst of the pandemic, and I mean, so I mean, where was she in Alabama when this happened?
Yeah, that was in Mobile, Alabama. And
So getting out just to get out to go to the
Did,
memorial or anything like that.
didn't happen.
But it didn't
Mm-mm.
happen. That had to be worse.
Yeah, it couldn't happen. And as a matter of fact, like the event that the University of South Alabama had for her was all socially distanced. You were standing like 12 feet apart in this big park. I'm like, it was like an unmemorial in a sense, you know. It was kind of sad that didn't get that closeness that you would have wanted. And I often think too that when people see and I've been asked this before without people reading the book, did she die of COVID? Because you see the 2020 death date,
Right, right.
and it was nothing to do with that at all. Um, but she really, she changed my life and made me who I am today. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And I know that she's up there smiling down on me and happy about where I'm at. And that's what I have to just carry forth on. And so what happened last year was the sentencing, because of COVID, the trial got dragged and kicked and punted and so many times before it finally went to trial in 2023. And I testified at sentencing, and just, you know, of course, you share how much somebody meant to you. It's really just more for the judge to hear that, yeah, this person really touched people's lives. And I was driving back to Lincoln, and I was just outside of Nashville. It's like, what am I doing with my life? You know, like, is this the end? Am I like just going to help, you know, consult small businesses for the rest of my life? This doesn't seem like a good thing to do. And I just decided, it's like, it was like a bolt of lightning type of thought. And I just, you know what, I'm going to talk about sobriety. I'm going to write another book. I'm going to figure out how to touch on this deeper and make it easier to understand what I'm doing. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to her memory, to Samantha's memory. And that's what I've done since.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's that's what I love, you know, about people like you, me, and a lot of other people that I've had on the show, is the ability to take something that was so, you know, it was tough, it was adverse, it was hard, you know, things that, and that's my biggest thing. And then my message to people is doing stuff that's hard, and then helping other people do things that are hard.
yeah,
You know, coming up with ideas and methodologies that can help them along the way, different ways to think about things. Because, you know, and I do it in coaching as well. I do it in endurance coaching, is that, you know, one way of doing something, my methodology might not work for everybody, right? But there's methodology. That's why you have different coaches and
yeah,
different methodologies. And I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But you know, we have what we call periodization, and then there's a you know, micro and macro periodization, and then, you know, there's always these different ways to go about it. And some people, the way they teach it and the way they don't, is, you know, will be able to resonate with one person and not another. That's why it's great that, you know, you talking to a coach, whether it be business consulting, whether it be a sobriety coach, whether it be an endurance coach, whether it be a business coach, that you talk with them, and then you know, put yourself involved and find out what their methodology is, and find out that it resonates with you, and that it's okay to say no, right?
mhm, yeah,
Don't feel like you got to be nice about it. You just have to say, you know what? I'm listening to you, and what you're saying doesn't resonate. I'm gonna move on. And that coach should be like, you know what? That's fine, because the people that don't resonate with you become high maintenance.
yeah. And they're looking. The reason that that in coaching, this is something that is often missed, I think, unfortunately, by a lot of coaches. Those high maintenance clients are that way because you're not fulfilling a need that they have, and you don't understand what that need is. And the greatest thing a coach should do at that point is like, we need to find a coach that better matches your mindset, because I'm not connecting with you in a way that is pushing you forward. And yeah, that's so important. Well, I'm a competitive figure skater. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's another, you know, like notch that we have in my realm. So
Andy, that's amazing.
3 years.
Where did you have time to become a competitive figure skater?
Well, 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? I need to do something and to like really improve my health for the long term. And one, I don't like being hot. Uh, so those long days of running cross country were not the most fun days of my life. But so I'd always wanted to ice skate, and maybe play hockey. So I went and decided I'd become a figure skater, and that's what I've done. So this lays into this whole coaching conversation, is that the coaches I've had along the way, you reach a certain point, and then it's like, you know what? This isn't really quite working for me, and I think I need to seek out another coach. I've had to have that conversation a couple times just to find the right personality and the right way of pushing you, because that's what's like so important. And So yeah, it's something I really enjoy. I've gotten relatively good at it. I'm just a shade under. I'm at pre-bronze level skater, which doesn't mean anything to you or maybe most of your listeners, but for an adult, that means like I'm right at the borderline of being a true competitive figure skater. I'm not going to find myself in the Olympics, obviously, but I'm pushing forward and probably will nail my axle sometime in the next year. I mean, that's a big milestone. And I'm super involved in my club here in Lincoln. I'm Santa Claus in our upcoming holiday show, so that should be fun.
So you all right, everybody. Just to make sure you listen and listen. Remember this name, Massimo Rigotti. Because you might find him as the oldest living Olympic figure skater to ever grace the ice.
You never know. I mean, like, yeah, I got to keep pushing myself.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. The alternate for the USA team. By the time you get there, 57-year-old Massimo Rigotti takes the ice.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah,
totally.
No, that's, what, that is something I am like, I love that, because that is my message. That is literally my biggest message to people, that if you want to change your life, you need to do something that's hard. You need to do something that's completely out of your realm, something that's completely uncomfortable. So and I've told the story, I don't know, but you're going to be episode 61, maybe 45 times. But basically, my idea was that I had somebody that was a friend of mine that was 5'4" and like 250 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. And she wanted to get fit, and she wanted to get better, but she had, realized that the typical, I'm going to diet, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to do all that stuff, that just wasn't for her. And she just happened to be skipping around on the channels, and she found Ironman Kona.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, huh, that's interesting. And she started doing her research, figured out that, there's a lot of different Ironmans around, Ironman competitions. And she's like, well, Ironman Florida, that's right here in my backyard. Couldn't swim, couldn't bike, couldn't run. Well, she started running 5Ks. That's how it goes. And she took the next 18 months and freaking just went to town. She didn't think about dieting. She didn't think about getting stronger. All she thought about was getting to the start line healthy and educated, and has got all the things that she need to finish the race. And she went and stood on the beach in a size small wetsuit weighing 120 pounds.
Awesome.
And
good for her.
Oh, not to mention that she did an 11-hour and 25-minute Ironman, which for anybody brand new to the sport is awesome. Is like an amazing time. So I was, but that's what I mean though, is that you decided that, hey, I need to get fit. Well, I don't like running outside. I'm not much of a gym guy. Let's do something else. I'm going to become a competitive figure skater.
Yeah.
Completely out of your realm, completely the whole bit, just the idea that you liked it. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, find something that just, you can't even think that you could possibly do. That could possibly get those smaller goals on the way. Kat chose Ironman. You chose figure skating. I got people that like had no freaking experience, were sedentary, and climbed Kilimanjaro and like
Awesome.
literally on their way to climbing Everest.
That is so
Found
cool.
St. Helens and Kilimanjaro, then Everest. I have people that didn't do anything in their life. Now they've done the 24-hour championship Tough Mudder, which is 24 hours and it's loops. How many loops can you do of 28 different obstacles in a 5 mile in a 5 mile loop, and it goes on for 24 hours. I've got people that, couldn't run a lick. They're running 100-mile races, 135-mile races in Death Valley. You know what I mean? And these are, but they had these certain goals and they're like, well, you know what? First of all, looking at the freaking scale, looking at yourself in the mirror, trying to look better, that's freaking boring, you know? Now people find the gym very, very motivational, and I give them credit for that. But the idea that, all right, I want to lose weight, I want to get fit, I want to look better. But those are just working on those things is limiting. But if I go, all right, I'm going to go climb freaking Kilimanjaro and I train for it and I do all that stuff on the way there. Well, it's a lot more fun thinking about being at the base of Kilimanjaro and knowing that you're going to hike up it, rather than all I'm thinking about is, oh, what's this? What is this next spoonful? How many calories is it? All right, fine. Okay, I can put it in my mouth. Oh, this next one, oh, that's not enough. I got to drop it down. Oh, you know what I mean? It's so much more fun just thinking about that than it is, these little tinier things. And I love that what you're doing. You decided to get fit by, taking on something that you've always loved, you always wanted to learn, and now you're learning it, and now you're at that point where you're going to be competitive. That's so awesome.
I think it comes down to the passion for it. If you're and I really haven't. I lost 50 pounds, so I mean, it really had I'm had a very positive impact on me. And not only that, it showed up in like everything I did. Now, mind you, I have destroyed my body with addiction and everything else that I did along the way. And I've had the same physician since I was 16 years old. And when I went in for my physical this past January, he busted out my 16-year-old physical to show me that I was actually in better shape now than I was at 16.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, hey, just curiosity, does he talk to you about like biological age versus chronological age?
Yes, absolutely.
What does he say about your biological age? I'm curious.
He said my biological age is 34, which
Ace, that's amazing.
Yeah, because I'm 49, so that's impressive. I mean, just thinking about everything I did to my body, the mere fact that it's sitting there it just blows my mind. But it also shows you the restorative power, and I think you can appreciate this for the coaching you do, the restorative power of your own body. It's highly restorative. You just have to quit doing all the horrible things to it, and it will repair itself. I mean, it really will.
Yeah, I take that very seriously about things. You know what I mean? People, letting people know that, hey, you know what? I know that I've on your plan is like 1.5 hours today, but that doesn't stop there. Besides your recovery process, besides your nutrition, you need to remain active. You need to keep walking. You need to be at a standing desk. Changing out your position. You need to walk around. You got to remain active. So, and that's restorative as well. So the last question I got for you is, can you give us a little bit on the SOBER method, just to kind of give an overview, and then we'll finish out and we'll say goodbye.
All right. Well, sounds great, Brad. It's obviously it's been a great conversation. I think we could go another hour. We could really have a long form if they.
Oh, we could.
Definitely. So the sober method. This all came about from me working with a coach that I had. So I had created this flavors of confidence method, and it was 10 steps. And it was a little complicated. And I shared it with a bunch of people in various AA meetings, like, well, what are you doing? You only show up to get your chips. I'm like, well, I'm doing this, and so I would tell people about it. And they're like, now, wait a second. So what is step 6 again? And I was like, I realized this is way too complicated. I wonder if I could boil it down into something that people could remember and then follow. So my thought was, of course, it went into marketing and branding, one of my original baselines. And I thought, I wonder if sober is available. And so I did some research. I'm like, I can't believe it's 2023 and sober method for sobriety is actually something that isn't a something. And so that's what I decided. And then I kind of worked backwards into how I was going to utilize my 10 steps and roll it into 5. So sober stands for stoic, observe, behavior, execute, and restore.
Nice.
And one of the most important things that I heard a lot at AA is a lot of people in today's age are uncomfortable with how much religious leaning there is within the program. And I feel that Stoicism provides many of the same fundamental philosophies, but it is not alienating to literally any race, creed, or religion. Stoicism can bind like the entire planet. It's really good ancient philosophy. So the way that it works is that you actually, and I always recommend like use Marcus Aurelius's meditations as a good starting point. Like literally just go pick out a verse, read that verse, and then write down in journal, like, how does this verse apply to me? What is going on here? What could I correct in my own life as it applies to this? Then you want to go to the next step, and then you're going to observe, like take a very good holistic view of like, how do you interact as it pertains to this one thing in your life and observe your behavior related to it. Okay, what could you do differently that maybe wouldn't want you to drink or use when these things happen? And so you kind of chart out your behavior as you're moving into the B step. It's like, okay, here's my behavior when this happens. And you use actually a behavior chain, which many people are familiar with if they're in a sobriety journey, and map out your behavior. So when this happens, then this happens. Okay, well, here's this alternate, and you kind of decide what you're going to do. And then as you're going to actually now test it, that's the execute step. So put yourself in a situation that you would normally do something and see whether or not your behavior change that you map for yourself works. If it works, good for you. You get to move to step R. It didn't work. Back to step B. You're actually going to remap it again. Then you're going to try it again. And then when you get to the restore step, it's all about looking at those that may have been impacted by this behavior change that you've made in yourself. And this is your making amends, the classic making amends to people that may have been hurt, injured, whatever in the past by you having this old behavior that you've now modified and reaching out to them. And I stress that, forgiveness doesn't mean you're going to be best buddies and hang out with them anymore. This just means you're going to, find your forgiveness and shake hands and be on your way. You don't have to restore relationships. You just want to restore that everything's even. And then you go back to step S. And so this works on, for those that have been in manufacturing or anything, this works on the Deming cycle. We're like just going to self-improve ourselves in a continuous improvement cycle, like we're manufacturing a better you. It's really just one step at a time. I'm literally on my 127th pass through the system right now. And I eat my own dog food for sure. I really believe in the system. It works. And slowly over time, you just find yourself in a whole different spot. And the reactions that you once had on things is completely different. I find myself sometimes actually stopping and going, wow, did I just say that? I mean, like old me would have done this. And I can't even believe I just reacted that way without thinking about it. And when you get to that point, oh, man, life's pretty easy.
That's incredible. And I love it. It's so refined. And in my work and stuff with athletes, it's efficient. But I get what you meant about the religious side. Heard a modification of the Serenity Prayer. Mm-hmm. And literally it just starts out with, I grant myself the strength, I grant myself the ability to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. They've taken God completely out of it, but they start to internalize it and say, no, I'm going to grant myself the strength. And I don't know if that falls under Stoicism or not, But I love that fact that people have just like taken the power and they've internalized it. I have no problem. I have no problem externalizing it with a faith that you believe in. I
Yeah,
have no
yeah.
issue with that. If that gives you strength and ability to do it, knock yourself out, go crazy. I don't have an issue with it. But for those that are questioning any kind of religious ties they've had in their past, they grew up with it or whatever, I love this new version of I grant myself.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So, but yes, Massimo, man, this has been amazing. And like you said, we could probably go on and on and on and on. I just to wrap up here. So you can go to Massimo Rigotti com, and you'll be able to see all of what we've talked about. You can book him as a speaker. You can check out the books, flavors of confidence, a reflection for those in need, and flavors of confidence, SOBER method, the sober method. And check those out on Amazon. Again, those links will be in the show notes. So you can always take a look there. And it looks like you're more active on YouTube and TikTok?
YouTube and TikTok, yeah. And if anyone wants to connect with me directly, pretty active on X.
Okay.
But YouTube and TikTok are my two active post platforms.
Great. So we'll put those links in the show notes as well. And again, I think this has been extremely informative, and there's a lot of great little nuggets that I talk about. Like I said, that if you take one nugget away from you that's going to help propel you in the direction that you want to go to reach your full potential, we've done our job. And there's been a lot in this one. So definitely, if you've heard it once, rewind, and I guess they don't do that anymore. Play it again, and go through it. There'll be some nuggets in the notes. There's always a blog post on lifechangingchallengers.com that accompanies this, so you'll be able to check that out. And then if you happen to check out the YouTube version of this, I really appreciate it if you hit subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell so you always know when there's another episode dropping. And if you're on Apple or on Spotify, please go ahead and leave a review, even if it's a bad review, because that's feedback to help me make this show as best as I possibly can. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Massimo. And for the rest of you, we'll see you